Okay, guys. Uh, I've got a tutorial here just sort of showing the process of cleaning up and creating a sort of mock presentation to show clients content. So in this case, we've used MacBook Pro and we're simulating the screen, the on-screen kind of graphics. Um, I could probably spend many hours teaching you exactly how to make this and various levels of embellishments. So what I thought I'd do in the first section was just sort of talk through the process. You can see there's quite a few layers in here. If you're not familiar with non-destructive image editing in Photoshop, which is using things like masks rather than actually deleting pixels, then this is probably not the best tutorial for you. Um, the idea with this is to be as smart as possible. Next, one of the obvious logical next steps would actually be to embed a smart object for the screen so that you could double click and paste your Photoshop file into that rather than having to go through the vanishing point. But this was originally a tutorial that I did in class with some of my students. In fact, this is a photograph that we took in a session with the same students of the laptop concerned, and then very little, because we cleaned it fairly thoroughly beforehand, fairly little work needed doing on it. What I would say is, because we didn't have the studio lighting that day, it's a little bit fuzzy when you zoom right in. I've also cut down the resolution from the point of view of the tutorial. Forgetting about the screen, these areas here, they're not pin sharp. So normally I would probably shoot this in the studio with slightly stronger lighting, get the exposure right and make sure that the original is pin sharp. What I tend to do is put in my depth of field later on in Photoshop if and when I decide I need it for a sort of artistic effect. So if I want the focus to be on the screen, then I can use a depth of field simulation like this, which kind of slightly blurs out. It's not the same as getting it done on lens, and I'm sure there'll be photographers out there that will want to kill me. But it's a great way of being able to make some of the post-production decisions later in terms of stuff like that. So, as a way of showing you kind of the basic steps, what I've got is I'm using this tool, which if you've not come across, very, very powerful when you're working with Photoshop in a file. You can create these snapshots as you go. The only negative thing is that these snapshots are not saved permanently into the Photoshop file. It is a real shame because they're pretty awesome, and what they allow you to do is jump back to different points in the history. So this is, since I've opened the file, all the sort of stages I've been through, looked at. I can create snapshots for key areas and then jump back to those later, and it saves my history from running out. As I say, the only thing that Adobe could do as a Christmas present for me would be to include a way of saving the history states, these snapshots, into the actual Photoshop file, and then I would literally be in heaven with it. But to give you an idea, this was the original file that I opened. Within that, we have a cleaned version. You can see I made this mask was much too strong, so I made a slightly mocked up version. There's a little bit more mileage in the canvas, but I'm zooming in so that you can see it slightly better at the resolution for this tutorial. So this sort of double this resolution. I think on the original it's probably 16 megapixel, so somewhere thereabouts digital photo, so it's probably 4 or 5 times bigger than this. Then there's a kind of cleaned and refined version, which includes the original screen display that was on at the time. So this is Launchpad and iOS, sort of bit like sort of Windows Start. If you're used to Windows 8, Windows 10, similar kind of thing, but for Mac, if you're not familiar with it. And it's sort of mirror reflected, or be this fake. The whole reflection of this laptop is completely fake, as you'll see in a second. Likewise, I could match any other content. This is a different tutorial I have on After Effects and sort of simulating iPhone functionality. So I've just screen grabbed that, popped it on screen, and also replaced the reflection. There's the actual original shot. This is the shot of the laptop as taken. I tell a lie, I didn't shoot it in the studio with my students. This is a shot at home. So it's just a pile of white paper sort of bent to try and create a bit of an infinity curve. You can see I haven't done a very good job of that. And then I've just shot it with natural daylight the screen is probably not as bright as it should have been, which is probably why my depth of field's a bit naff. I've probably not used a prime lens on this, and therefore it's a little bit blurred in corners. So the idea is sort of, once you have these elements, with a flick of a switch, you can go from a darker background potentially to a lighter background. You can put in a colored background. You can also mock in, initially there's an investment in making this. Once you get it made, it's pretty fast to mock up new content and change it. So this is a mock for a website I've done for a client. And likewise, you could very quickly, change the darkness. All I'm doing here is thinking about whether the screen is standing out enough. Well, if I make the background too dark, suddenly the screen becomes kind of important, but so does the laptop itself being silver. So I've darkened it off. I've used a bit of depth of field to sort of take the focus off the laptop and onto the screen. And I've put in this kind of purple to complement the brand. It's kind of standard fare, the sort of stuff that, when it's on a website, it looks a lot more impressive, or when you showcase it to a client, it looks a lot more kind of literal and realistic. They can now understand this is a desktop version of the website rather than being confused about what is what. So that's kind of where the tutorials stem from. So what I'm going to do over the next tutorial is just take you through some of those steps. I'm not going to go through them in great detail. It really would take too many hours to be worthwhile. So I assume a certain intermediate level of Photoshop knowledge of basic masking, being able to use selection tools to make selections and thereby make masks, and then kind of common sense experience with Photoshop that allows you to come in and potentially switch in and out different backdrops. I can take out some of these and should be able to see the impact when I put the depth of field thing on. So I could switch for black, or I could go for flat grey, or I could go for gradient. So you can see once I've bothered to build it, cut things out, make masks, I've got drop shadows. I've got versions in here that are the reflection. If I didn't want a glossy version of this, I could take off, the reflection. So all these have been some have been manufactured, but most have just been cleaned up from the original photograph and masks used to replace the background. So again, join me in the next tutorial and I'll take you through a little bit of that journey. Okay, see you then.